So, if your life was a movie, what would it be?
Well, probably would be like a robot detective that hunts down my own kind and then stumble upon a secret that reveals a lot more about the world than I realized. And then, trying to figure that out.
Fantastic. My name is Darren,
And I'm Tim.
and this is Movie Beings. All right, so today we will talk about Blade Runner 2049.
Yes.
Apparently, one of Tim's all-time favorite.
Apparently. Darren Norton's like, what are you talking about?
How many times have you seen it?
Probably a lot. I remember when it came out in the theatre, I watched it 3 times. That's probably the most I've ever watched any movie in a theatre.
Consecutively?
Not in a row, but like when it was out in the theatre. Usually if I see something in the theatre once, I'm happy. But this, I remember, I think I went with both of my mates, and then one of my other mates roped someone else into going with us again. So, yeah, I was just like, I don't know what it was about this movie that just really resonated with me and took me in. Like, because I enjoyed the first Blade Runner, but there's something, I don't know what, as we'll go into further down, but just something about this movie really resonated with me then and still does now.
Okay. So what was your first impression of the movie? I think the better question should be, after you finished the first viewing, how did you feel about the movie?
I just thought it was amazing. Like, so much about the movie was shot, the shots in it, cinematography, a lot of the sounds, like every time in the city, like the big booming noises, just like capture that you're in this huge city. Like, I think the acting's amazing. I think Ryan Gosling in this is very good.
Yeah.
Like, he really sells what Kay or Joe, however you want to call him, like the like kind of emotional roller coaster he goes through this whole movie. Because that's what I feel like I resonate with his character, just kind of like what he goes through this whole movie. And then I remember I'm like, oh, because that last scene is what really hit me. And I was like, oh, God. It really is like, just really captures, I don't know, that character very well.
Okay. I mean, Ryan Gosling has always been well known for his, I guess, minimal acting and facial expressions. You know, like he doesn't have that many expression on his face, but he transpires a lot of emotions through that. But we can talk about his acting later. Let's dive into the cinematography, the visuals, the world building. So this is 2049. I think it's set in LA.
Yes.
Okay. So talk to me about like the world building in this movie.
So like the same thing happens in the first Blade Runner, where it has like the line of text about what's happening and explains what replicants are, which are just like, what's to say, biomechanical robots.
Yes. Humans. Bio-engineered humans.
Yeah, so that's the thing. They're not quite robots.
Yes.
But it explains how that there was a Tyrell company before, and then they had all their issues, so they shut it all down. And then Wallace, the new, I think it was Wallace, right? He came and bought it all out. And then it shows that they've got these people called Blade Runners that hunt down the old models from the Tyrell who can have got their own like emotions and their own will and can kind of fight back and have, can cause problems. So Ryan Gosling, he goes out to hunt down these older models to make sure that they're not causing any more trouble. And that's like the opening scene, which is crazy. When he's in his police car, like floating over the city, all the like solar panels, like this huge solar panel farm, and he kind of rolls over his farm, which it shows later, which is like, I think it's like witchery grubs or bugs.
Yeah,
they farm
larva,
for protein. Yeah,
the larva farm. Yeah,
and it like really kind of captures the essence of like, this is like really far out of the residential area, and this is kind of like what they have to do for food because like, it looked pretty barren.
There are no trees.
There's no trees. There's no like literal like a farm. You think a farm like, maybe like corn or maize, wheat, stuff like that, fields of lettuce or something. But it's just like, little bath. I think it was like David Pacese's character. Yeah. He like puts his hand and pulls them out, and there's just like all the bugs in his hands. Like,
yeah. And
then later on when he runs into him, he explains like, I'm farming protein. And he's like, he throws him all the bugs. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's not uncommon for the science fiction movies to set up in utopian world, like post apocalypse kind of setting.
Like, it's weird because Blade Runner initially wasn't post-apocalyptic, but this is, I wouldn't even say this is post-apocalyptic, but it's just like their use of robots, because they later in the movie they say they have a blackout,
Yeah.
and they refer to it a few times where they lost everything. I think they said 2020
Yeah.
in their timeline,
Yeah.
close to us as well, which is weird with
Yeah.
the COVID thing,
Yeah.
but that's when the world like loses a lot of its because it was all digital. I remember when he was talking to. When he's looking for information about one of the robots or one of the replicants, he's like, yeah, we lost so much data.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like a little bit, not to like the extent. Obviously, when we see the rest of the world, you could argue that it is apocalyptic.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there are no trees, there are no other lives, no animals. So I didn't watch the first movie, but I really enjoyed this movie as a standalone one. And when I first watched the opening scene, I thought, okay, something horrible must have happened to the world, because all we have now is just technology, no other life form.
Well, it's funny. Humans happened. That's what did it.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like any external, we took it too far, which is what kind of happened. And then that's why they've like changed how replicants are, because it's like it went too far and they kind of fought against this. We have to kind of like bring it back a bit so they don't kind of rebel. Like the Matrix.
Let's talk about that opening scene. So Ryan Gosling met Dave Bautista.
I think he's Sapper. I think he's
Sapper Morton.
Morton, that sounds.
And so he was a military medic.
Yes.
And then he became a farmer. Okay, talk me through that opening scene.
You can already see like the tenseness of the scene. So when Ryan Gosling enters that house first, he sees like the pot on. He's like cooking something, and he's like, "Oh, someone's obviously here." So and he goes like sits off in the dark, and as Bautista like enters back into his house and goes to his pot to like check it, and then Ryan Gosling doesn't say anything till a bit later, and it's like, "Oh," there's already the tension there of like, "Oh," he like Sapper already knows something's going on. He's like, "Oh, are you police?" I think he asked him, "Are you police?" straight off the get go, and he's like,
Yeah. And I think that's a very interesting exchange. So Bautista asked Gosling, "Are you police?" And then Gosling asked him back, "Are you this serial number?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and then,
which is how they refer to the replicants. They don't really have names, as we see throughout the movie. They usually just refer to their number.
Yeah. And I still remember here Bautista's response. He said, "I'm a farmer."
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like he's one of the older models who he's being hunted by Ryan Gosling, but he still has some individuality about him. Like he's not like a part of a system. He has kind of got his own, will.
Okay, so the older generation or the older models are being hunted because they have uncontrollable emotions.
Yeah,
and they rebel against their creators,
because no one with that much like autonomy wants to be doing something for someone else for no reason. That's kind of the gist, because we see when we see a bit later on when people are trying to order replicants for their own use, you see that they're just like, they don't need to be intelligent. They kind of only need to serve their purpose, just like any other machine. When clearly, as we go through the movie, they're not just machines.
Okay, I mean there are so many underlining what's the word I was looking for?
Themes?
Philosophies, yeah. Yeah, I mean, which I really enjoy talking about. So after that opening scene...
they get into it, obviously, because he's like, Sapper doesn't want to be taken. Yeah. And Ryan Gosling, is just like, if we don't have to, if I can take you in, that's a great option. And then you can already see Sapper's like, "Oh, no, we're fighting." And he's like, what's he, like twice the size of Ryan Gosling?
Realistically, in a real fight, I don't think Ryan Gosling can take on Dave Bautista, who is the 3-time WWE champions. But I guess, in the movie world, if you are the main character, you have the plot armor. But you didn't even need to use a gun. He put a gun on the table. Yeah, he
put the gun on the table. It's pretty intense when he like smashes his head through the wall.
Yes.
It's like, oh God. You can already tell they're like on a different level compared to like watching people fight, essentially. Yes. Because they've all got, more power and strength than a normal person.
That's one of the details that really tripped me about this movie. Like at the start, they set it up as, so Ryan Gosling is a replicant. So he's got enhanced strength and abilities and etc. So when they were fighting, they went through walls. They can punch each other, which is fine. But like in the later parts of the movie, when they try to establish himself to be something different, then it really confused me.
I think that's like, because they do bleed and stuff. Like they still get injured and things. Because you can see after the fight with Batista, he's like cut up. And is it the director or the head of the police? And she's like, "Oh, I'm not paying for you to like get fixed." And he's like, "I'll just glue it."
Yeah.
Because it's not like the same as a human injury where you might need to see a doctor. He's just like, "I'll just use glue." And like you see him when he glues himself back together.
Yeah.
But it's funny because when Sapper and Kay are talking to each other, they're like kind of, but he talks about him seeing a miracle and about how like they're perceived as replicants and what actually means. And he talks about seeing a miracle, which really sticks with Kay through the rest of the movie, or at least the first part when he's trying to figure out what the hell's happening.
Yeah.
Because after that, when they go outside and he's, I assume, killed him because he's got his eye after he figures out who he is. And then he sees a dead tree. You're talking about how there's no trees. And this tree that was like, it was literally pinned up like a tent. It had like little spikes to hold it up.
Yeah.
And there was a little flower there, like it would be at a grave.
Yeah.
So it was a bit sus. And when they check lower, they find some bones in there, which is like another thing. It's like, replicants aren't meant to feel anything, right?
Yes.
So it's like, he's actually leaving flowers at a grave.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's another mystery. It's like, what's actually going on with these replicants?
Yeah.
And why would they bury one of their own? Like, that shouldn't, that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't watch the first movie, but I could still follow this storyline of this movie as a standalone one. And and I think the first arc of this movie is very captivating.
Yeah.
From the first moment in, like, you have some conflicts, you have some actions, you have some mystery to keep you engaged. Talk about that coffin or the box that
it was found. A box.
It's a box, right? So I think he brought the box back to the police department, and then he left the box there, and then he went back home first.
No. He goes to the police station first.
Yes.
And there's another pivotal scene where he's getting like a checkup, and they're asking him cells intertwined cells, where it's just checking his baseline. This is like another thing about controlling the replicants, making sure they're also not out of whack, so they're still in control and that they're not going to go do something, something they don't want them to do, which we see later when he gets a lot more shit happens to him where it changes to him. But that shows that it's like, when something kind of traumatic happens to them, they're like, we got to check that they're still going to follow us, they're still in line.
What is that baseline test? Like when I watched it, I understand its purpose, but I kind of don't understand how it works. So like the machine is asking,
it's a person asking him questions, and it's just seeing how he reacts.
Okay.
It's not. I remember. Well, I'm like, what's this really mean? But I think it is just about his reaction to it.
Okay.
And how quick? Because at the first time we see it, he does fairly well. He just reacts quickly.
Yeah.
And at the end, it was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But later on, he does it again when we get up to that.
Yeah.
And you can see that, you can clearly see the difference in how he reacts.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Because it does seem more complicated, right? When he's like cells intertwined, and then cells, and it's like, why are you
repeating these words? I have I couldn't understand the test. I understood the purpose of the test to make sure that he doesn't behave out of the ordinary. So he brought that coffin back into the police station. And they did dissect.
They laid them all out, and then they were just like checking it.
Yeah.
Because they were wondering who it was. And when they were checking it, they find cuts on her pelvis because they can see that she was pregnant and that someone had to do an emergency C-section to get the baby out. So they're like, she died through pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then Kay, he'll notice something. He's like, what's this? And they look closer into it. And they find out that she herself was a replicant, which is something that shouldn't happen. Replicants can't reproduce.
Yeah.
So this...
The jump starts like the next
story.
arc of the movie, right?
Because it kind of gives you a quick kind of base of like how the world is. Because even when Kay first goes back to the police station, he runs into one of the other policemen. He's like, skin job. And like you can see that they hate replicants.
Yeah. what does that nickname mean? Skin job or skin?
Like it. So, like in the Terminator where they wear fake skin over the robot?
yeah.
That's what I think it refers to. That they're only skin on the surface, but underneath, they're not human.
Okay.
So I think it's just like, to offend him. Even though like later through the movie, we can see that, he's far from just being a robot.
Yeah.
But I think that's pivotal as well. We see that a bit later on about how they're like treated and stuff. But
yeah.
It just sets the world
Yeah.
in such a good way where it's like,
Yeah.
they're clearly still not liked. Obviously, after everything that went down, they're just like,
Yeah.
We're still going to make sure treat them like shit.
So one of the details that I really like about this set piece is like it really showcased his enhanced ability, because like I think the guy in the medical office, when he did the anatomy, he was operating the machine to zoom into the details, but he didn't recognize the serial number on the bone marrow, and Kay did.
Yeah, and it wasn't like on the surface. It was like
way
when they're
deeper.
like looking at like the anatomy or whatever, that he's really going deep down.
He did the CSI zoom.
Yeah, zoom in. There it is.
Enhance. Zoom in. Enhance. Zoom in.
It's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And that kind of, like you said, that starts like the whole thing. Like they're like,
Yeah.
oh shit.
Yeah.
Because he goes and talks to the chief again, and she's like, we need to clean this up now. Like this can't get out. That
What was the motivation from the chief police to clean up this?
she
this
explains
incident?
that like she was explaining there's kind of like an imaginary wall between humans and the replicants, that they're different and that they need humans to like live, and finding out a replicants could reproduce. Why would they need humans anymore? That's kind of like the whole, it's just like, if this gets out, like they're all going to rebel to be like, hey, we don't need you guys. And then it loses that illusion for the humans. So they've got no protection to be like,
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
like part
the
of it.
and the replicants were created to be the slave labor, right? So to do the jobs that the humans don't like.
When we're introduced Wallace later, he kind of goes over that quite well when he's explaining that they got too scared of slave labor, so he had to create one.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, it's extremely sad. It's still like, these things are still like living beings, which, because that's like the whole thing this kind of movie goes through is like, are they really things that are living? Because at the end of the conversation with the chief, I think Kay says like, when they're talking about the kid being born, he's like, to be born is to have a soul. And then he goes to leave, and the chief's like, I think you've done all right. And he's like, done all right without what? And he's like, without having a soul. So it's like that whole essence of like, because we're being created rather than being, being made.
Been born.
Yeah, it like means a big deal to replicants because they're all made.
Yeah. And I think during that conversation, Kate said something like, I haven't killed anything that is born before.
Yeah, I've never killed anything that's born. That's like another thing. And she's like, is that going to be a problem? He's like,
no.
I didn't say, what did he say? I didn't think that was a no.
I think she was saying something like, are you saying no to me, boy?
Like, and I said, I can't say no, can I? Or something like that.
It's not an option.
It's not an option to say no. Which lays it out even more, where it's like, they're clearly there just to do their kind of job.
And then we got introduced to Kay's virtual girlfriend, Joy.
AI girlfriend.
AI girlfriend, oh man.
Which is now a big thing. Funny enough, it wasn't that big at all back then, but that's why I sounded funny watching it again. I was like, now AI girlfriends are like big at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But her name's Joy, I think that's what they call it.
Yeah, Joi.
Yeah,
Joy.
I was trying to look it up and I was like, because I think it's Joy is like, it's meant to be Japanese for like happiness or something. So that's like the gist of it. But this is like, he gets home, he's in like a huge apartment complex.
Yeah.
And you can see when he's walking home, everyone's kind of glaring at him and giving him some shit. I think an old lady says she's like going to kick him or trip him or something.
Yeah.
Like another language. I'm like, oh, Jesus.
What? And that's a very fun detail of this movie. Kay seems to understand different languages, but he doesn't speak them.
Yeah.
You know, like he understood what that old lady was saying. A bit later down the movie, when he was talking to like a whole old system, and that system was talking in Japanese, so he understood that as well. But let's get back to that. So we got introduced to Joy, his AI girlfriend, played by Ana de Armas, very pretty actress. What do you think about her acting in this role?
I think she does a great job of playing that kind of like caring girlfriend throughout the whole thing, because to him it is real, and that's like, this is like another level to like the whole thing of like him coming home and having something to go home to that he cares about, because he clearly cares about her, whether, you know, she's real or not. And like he comes home and this is his way he gets away from everything essentially, and they seem to get on very well. And in the moment, so she's like generated through like a projector in his room, and he buys like
The animator, sorry,
that can project her anywhere essentially.
Yeah.
So he can take her wherever she wants.
Yeah. Whichever companies can produce that this year might become the next big thing, might become the next unicorn.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, oh God, that'd be so weird. But it's just him, because at this point there's been like moments where it's like, oh, for someone that's meant to be like a robot, he doesn't come across as a robot. You've seen some of the things he cares about and the things he's done so far. But then when you meet Joy, you're like, oh, this is strange. Like, why would he need to go home and have like a relationship? So it really shows that like they're not completely just built to not
fear anything.
Yeah, they kind of are created to care like a human and be like a human. And this is like a big point. It's like, oh, like if you were just a robot, why would you could just go home and like sit and do nothing, right? You wouldn't need to interact.
Plug in.
Yeah.
Just recharge.
Because they eat food normally. Like they're not, you know, they don't, like you said, charge. They don't have to like charge up or anything. They eat like anybody else. And they drink as well. I think he has a few drinks throughout the movie where it's just like, oh, why would he need to do any of this?
Ah, interesting.
Because there is the thing is like, is he pretending to be human? But then why would he need to pretend to be human at home?
Interesting.
Like, so it like creates this other thing of like, oh, there's a lot more humanity to these replicants than maybe humanity wants to let on there is. Hence why they do that test as well, because it's like, oh, maybe they become too human and then they want their freedom. And that's like a big thing in this movie for me. But I think it's great when I feel like their chemistry is really good in this, because there's another movie that came out recently that was on Netflix, and they're in it together again, Ryan Gosling and Anna. And it was terrible. It was terrible. I remember watching it, I'm like, oh, they're in it again. Now I wonder if it'll be as good. Their chemistry will be like kind of similar to what it was in Blade Runner. I'm like, no, it was terrible. It was so bad. I was like, oh my God. That's why I was like, oh, this has really captured something. Because when he gets the emitter, they go upstairs. It's like, oh, where do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Where do you want to
go to the roof?
And they go to the roof
and
in the rain.
She was feeling in the rain.
Yeah. That was a great scene as well, when she kind of like holds her hand out and the rain's like passing through her.
Yeah.
And then obviously it just like animates that she has rain on her and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good scene. I think it's kind of blurs the line between reality and virtual reality.
Yeah.
To Kay, she's real.
Yeah,
but to us, she's not.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, like, when they are staying in the rain, and it's a very funny scene. The funny part when they were going in for a kiss, and then she just froze because there's a voice message coming in.
But I think that as well, like, I don't know how they did it in the filming, where she's like, she's not there, and it does a very good job of showing that she's not there, she doesn't exist. Because that would be extremely hard to act. It's like you're trying to touch him, but you can't touch him. Because that's why it's like they're trying to like kiss, and it's like awkward because he's not holding anything and she's not holding anything. So it's like a weird another barrier of like, you know, how do you care for someone that you can't really touch or feel? Which we like, you know, later down the line it goes through more of that kind of stuff. But that's like another thing. How can you have a relationship with someone that's not there?
Yeah. But I mean, what choice does Kay have though?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he clearly doesn't have. At this point, we haven't seen him have any other relationship with any other person apart from Joy. Really, like he talks to the chief well enough, but it's not.
That's a bit of a weird relationship as well.
Yeah, that's a weird relationship as well. We'll get further down there, but it seems fine.
Yeah,
like it doesn't, because I think the doctor like calls him skin job accident at one point. He's like, oh, sorry. Like you can probably tell even the people that maybe are not so upfront about not liking him are still kind of, they're in that mindset of like, oh, they're different than us. But it does seem the chief like understands that, but doesn't hold it against him.
Yeah.
As much as she's like, oh, are you going to carry out my orders essentially?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so he got called back into the police station, and they found out that the bones belonged to a replicant who had a baby.
Yeah.
So the chief of police wanted to cover that up, just so to protect the human world, and so hence the investigation started. Where did Kay go next right after that?
So he has the bones. So he's trying to find out. He needs to go to find like through Tyrell's evidence.
Right.
To try to find out where it came from and who it is.
Yeah.
But in this time, I think that's when we're introduced to Wallace.
Yes.
The creator, or who's making the replicants now. And he's got a replicant that works with him called Love. I think that's when we're introduced to her as well. Is this the scene when they're creating the replicant the first time and he's like talking her through it? Was that a bit later on?
I think that is a bit later on. I think this is when Ryan Gosling came into like a library kind of place, and he gave like the hair sample to the bald guy. The bald replicant. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know if he's a replicant or not.
Yeah.
Because he does have memories.
Yeah.
He does explain like he's like, oh, my family before the blackout.
Yes.
So we don't know if he's a replicant or not.
Yes.
Because if he was a replicant, he probably wouldn't be working. Because that's what I remember watching. I'm like, I think he's human. Just working.
Yes.
Because, you'd think like they probably would have a replicant working there.
Yeah.
But, because she does come later. But that's what I was trying to remember. Do they have a... Because I know there's 3 scenes with Wallace. That's why it's funny. Wallace was... what's the actor's name?
Jared Leto. Yeah.
He's only got like 3 scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I'm not a huge fan of him personally, but I think he does. He's a great actor. I won't deny him that much. But he does a great job in this.
Yes.
Of like portraying kind of... You can see Wallace has got a bit of a god complex that he's a bit more important than everybody else.
Yes.
And that he's going to like solve the problems. Because I remember they talk about taking worlds and stuff. And that without their help, they wouldn't be able... I think he said 8 or 9 worlds or something, which is... They don't really show much of, like, space travel or anything, but it imposes that because of his, like, slave labor, they're able to, like, go into the stars and stuff, which is, like, insane, but...
Like the 9 realms of the Marvel universe. Yeah.
But that's what I was trying to remember. I can't remember the first scene, because I do remember there's a few scenes. Yeah.
I think the first scene that we got introduced to Wallace... I think after Kay met with Love, so Love took him into like an older library where she showed him like the older recordings of the conversations in those
little
spheres,
balls, that record.
And I think after that, Kay kind of said goodbye, and then she came back to the office.
Even that is pretty important in itself, because the spear re-shows Decker interviews the replicant, who is Rachel. We don't know this at the point. Yeah. But that's in the first movie when he interrogates her, giving her like the replicant test to see if she's a replicant or a human. And it shows a little snippet of that. Yeah. And I think it's about when he asks her, do you like women? And he's like, are you trying to find out if I'm a lesbian or a replicant? But that's just like another... It doesn't play too... Like, it doesn't matter if you know or not, because it's just like, it's kind of an interesting scene. But... Yeah. Like you said. Then after that, and also before he leaves, she says, it's like, your name's Love. You must be special.
Yes.
Because replicants don't get names.
Yes. And I think the character of Love is an interesting character in this movie as well. Like, she kind of behaves like Rachel in the first movie, whereas, I think if I remember correctly from what I read, Rachel is like the newest model of the replicant in the older movie, right? So Love is like...
No one knows. She was deliberately made to be as human as possible.
Yeah.
That's why early in Blade Runner, Harrison Ford goes there to like, he's like, he's looking for one at the moment. He's like, hey, can you just humor me and do this test on this person, Rachel? And he's like, why do you want to do this? He's just like, just go and just humor me. So he does the test on her and can't tell if she's a replicant or not. So she's like the highest level.
Yeah.
This is Tyrell at this point. So he's made as far as he thought he could go with them to make them as human as possible.
Yeah.
It's like the Turing test to see if they're machine or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So after that library scene, Love came back, and then we got introduced to Wallace. Was that the first time that Wallace appeared?
I'm trying to remember now. Bloody hell, I don't know why I can't remember. Because there's a scene where they're like making the new replicant. And
Yes.
He, like, tests it. That's a crazy scene in itself.
Yes. No, I think the first time that we got introduced to Wallace was when Love came back, and then she told him about the baby, and then right, or was that?
That might be later.
Yeah.
Because when they're making the replicant, he's like looking her over. She's like naked.
Yeah.
And he's like having this big monologue.
Yes.
About how everything goes. And he's like, there's one thing we can't create, and like puts his hand over
the stomach,
the replicant's stomach, that we can't change this. We can't make them breed and stuff.
Yeah.
And then he like, it's pretty brutal, like slits her belly. He like kisses her and like splits her belly and then like lets her flop off.
Yeah.
And we forgot to mention, he is blind, so he's got this weird like plug-in.
Yes.
And it like has all these little robots that come out to stare for him.
Yeah.
Which is later on, it's important, but the whole like him kissing the replicant comes back into later with Love, because she kind of watches him and like recreates that later in another scene, which I always thought was funny. But I think that must be the first scene.
Yeah, it must be the first scene. Yeah.
And she comes back later to talk about what we got to do with you've got to find out. She's like, you got to find out. You got to track down Kay and find out where
the baby is. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the first time we got introduced to Wallace when Love came back into the office, and she was saying something like, "Oh, sir, we're ready to test the newest models."
Yes.
Right, and then that scene is horrifying. Like,
it is crazy because that's like, it dehumanizes them again, because it's just like they're creating them. He has complete control, and the way he like throws them away as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like really sad to see. Like they look completely human, but they're not treated like human at all.
Okay. Yeah. Wallace is played really well by Jared Leto. I think he doesn't appear much in this movie. You mentioned it 3 times. So that was the first time we met him. So Kay went on his investigation. Where did he go next after he met up with Love?
So he finds out about Rachel. And I don't think they get enough data or something.
Yes.
So I think he decides to go back to the farm where Sapper was.
Okay.
Because he remembers the miracle thing. And he's like, I've got to go back to see if there was anything else going on. And he looks inside the piano and finds a little
box
tin. And it's got a sock in it.
Yes.
And a photo of a lady holding a baby. So that's like, oh, that must be the baby.
Yeah.
And then he goes outside and looks at the tree, and the tree has a number on it. It has like a sequence of like 3 numbers. I can't remember.
6, 10, 21.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I wonder what that means.
Yeah. No, but I think before he went back into Saber's farm, I think he was just hanging about at a bar on the street.
Oh, is that
and then he got approached by a prostitute. But I think that prostitute
must have been before. Yeah, it must have been before that.
Yeah.
Scene.
Because I think that he was
a lady comes up to the 3 of them.
Yes.
And says, hey, find out what that man in the coat,
what
information he has.
And now I have just realized that lady was Love.
No. It wasn't Love.
It wasn't Love.
It was that lady that had missing the eye. Well, I think it was on this side.
Ah, okay. I see.
Because you see later on in the movie, we see her. But that's what I remember. I'm like, I don't remember that too well, where she like comes up and like tells them, get his information. And then they go there, and then they realize what he is, that he's a Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And it is like, oh, we're not going to be anyone that kills their own kind, essentially, which makes
perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. But the one girl stays and tries to like chat him up and wonder what he's, because I think he was looking at some of the old photos from the investigation.
Correct. Yes.
And she's like, so what's that? Oh, that's a tree. And he's like, no, I don't think I've ever seen a tree.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that gave him the idea. Okay, so this tree is something different. One of the funny details that I think was quite interesting. He's part of the police force. He came back to Saber's farm, and then he just cut open the police line. Said, "Hey man, you are the police officer. You're not supposed to do this." So he just cut it open, set sat on the sofa contemplating what to do next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. Like he's supposed to be this kind of detective and policeman who always follows the rules, and the first thing that he did was just cut open the police line.
Yeah, that's all right. bigger, more daunting problems going on.
Yes.
But like we were saying about the scene where they're replicants, but they're like the prostitutes, and then the girl like figures out that he has joy, and she's like, oh, you don't like real women.
Yeah.
Which leads into something later, but
yeah,
I think that's important to realize, to be like, oh, you know, like he doesn't show an interest in anyone else really.
Yeah.
Which is like another thing of like him trying to, I don't know if it's like on purpose, but kind of separates himself from everybody else really, humans and replicants.
You made a very good point that he can't really make any connections with anyone, but I think he had a really strong connection with those numbers.
Yeah.
You know, like the reaction that he had was like shocking.
Yeah.
And immediately, at first when I saw the movie, I didn't understand what those numbers meant. When he went back to the lab and then he was asking the machine to find babies who were born on the 6th of October 2021. And okay, so these are the day of birth.
Yeah.
Duh. You know?
Yeah, it makes sense now.
Yeah, but for some reason, the machine couldn't find any data.
It couldn't find the exact date, so he's looking through it manually, trying to find.
So those numbers are the DNA of a person,
that's the
isn't it?
DNA of each child, and he's just looking through them to try to find, you know, the right.
There were thousands.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There were so many. But like we were saying before, he's so shocked because it's a dream or a memory he had.
Yeah.
So he's trying to. That's why he was shocked, and he explains that to Joy, that he was getting chased as a child, and he had this wooden toy that had those numbers on the side. That's why he was so shocked, and he hides it in a furnace. Yeah. And then the kids are trying to beat him up, trying to get the toy off him.
I think that was the second time that Joy told Kay that I always knew that you were special.
Yeah.
And I think from that moment on, from that moment on, and also from it kind of gave me the idea that maybe Kay is this child.
Is the child, yeah.
But the thing is, it gave me that idea, but the movie also gave me different evidence that he isn't.
Yeah. It's still not clear. It's still kind of like up in the air at this point. Because even when he does find out when he's looking through the files to try find the child, and he finds a boy and a girl, so it's still not clear who it is at this point. And it's just like, I've got to keep going. Yeah. So that's when he gets the idea to try to go to the orphanage where he found where these dates were from. And he's just like, oh, let's go to the orphanage and try to find out.
You want to take a ride? And then they went to the tip.
They went to the tip. You want to go to the tip? That's where all the children are kept, apparently.
Unwanted children.
So, yeah, when he's on his way to find the orphanage, he gets shot out of the sky.
That was a good action scene.
It was. Yeah. It was. There are a few good action scenes in this. But, yeah, he gets shot out of the sky by these, like, scrappers, people trying to, you know, find whatever they can to get some money, I'm assuming, unless they're just, like, shooting things out of the sky. Yeah. It could be.
Yeah. I just like how nonchalant he was inside his car.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? Oh, I'm being shot. Okay, I guess I'm just going to crash now.
I'm just going to crash. I think things happen, right? What are you going to do about it? Because even when they're like sawing the door off, and he's just like, oh, maybe I should, you know,
open the door.
Maybe I should get ready.
He opened the door and he just walked out. And what's going on, guys? And then
when the first guy tries to take him on, and they're like, maybe we can't take him on one-on-one.
Yes. And during that action scene, there was another drone that was shooting out rockets.
I think it was a satellite.
Oh, wow.
I think it was a satellite where the missiles were coming from.
Yeah, that was brutal.
It was.
That was like just metal and flesh
going everywhere.
Up. Yeah,
those poor people didn't stand a chance.
Mm-hmm. And then it was revealed that Love was controlling that satellite.
Yeah, it goes to her. Yeah, and it's crazy because she's just like getting her nails done.
Yeah,
and she's just got these like glasses on, just being like fire, just shooting these people down. And it's like, damn.
Yes.
Jeez, just focus on one thing at a time.
That's very convenient that you can start a nuclear warfare just from your salon.
Good on Google Glass or whatever it would be.
But I guess that helped him.
I'm still
overcome the
surprised he
challenge.
wasn't too shocked by that. It's like,
Yeah,
why would someone be, giving me an airstrike to help me get through the situation?
but wasn't he injured by the airstrike as well?
He was he's like down and just like a bit taken back. And then after it all happens, he kind of gets up and is like,
Yeah,
oh,
they're all dead.
yeah, what's going on here?
I guess I will continue my investigation.
Yeah, whatever. Airstrikes happen all the time.
And he found the orphanage.
Yes.
He walked in, and a bunch of kids just started touching him. It kind of reminds me of the scene from Batman v Superman, where Superman was like surrounded by a sea of people. So the kids started touching him, and they brought him in to meet their leader.
I think he was walking in. I think they were seeing him as a way out. Like, who knows how long they've been there, trying someone to adopt them to get out of that situation. Because as we go in, we can see they're pretty much just being worked as slaves, just taking apart metal, trying to.
What
get
were they
certain
doing?
Well, I think they were just trying to get certain like copper or metal out of whatever the debris they've found to try to make some money out of it. But obviously, they're all just sitting on little tables, bent down, like just picking things apart. And that's when he runs into the owner, and then he's like asking him questions about this child and this date, and he's like, "Nah, never heard of that. I don't.
We
keep
don't have
records."
that record.
Yeah.
That goes far back. That's orphanage. It's very similar to Zion in the Matrix, don't you think?
Similar vibe of
Yeah, a similar vibe. At
just
the end of the world.
At the end of the world. No one hunting them down so much, but there's pretty much nothing out there.
Yes.
Ends of the earth.
How did Kay know that the owner of the orphanage was lying? Like to use force to get him to talk?
Maybe he was hoping, and he's just like, well, because what's he say? I know you keep those records. You seem like someone that keeps those kind of records.
Okay.
And then hits him in the face. I think that was motivation as well.
And so he went to the office. Yes, and this is one of my favorite set pieces in this movie because, as I mentioned before, I didn't watch the first movie before I watched this one. And the pace of the movie up to this point is really easy for me to follow. And before this, he had mentioned the memory, and it was established that the memory was implanted.
Yeah. That it wasn't a real. It couldn't,
So he got into the office, and of course, conveniently, the pages that he was looking for were gone. The owner was kind of sneaking out. Said, "Sorry, I didn't do this.
I didn't do this.
That was a bit funny.
Don't hit me again."
That was a bit funny. And I noticed some small detail. He was spinning the ashtray. Why did he spin the ashtray?
So when he was looking at the ashtray, because before when they were walking towards his office, the memories of what it was kind of come back to him because he remembers the place a little bit. He's like, oh, is this where
I recognize the place as well.
Yeah, that's what he thought. He's like, I recognize this place. And then when he goes up to the ashtray and he spins the ashtray itself is actually a horse ashtray. And that's what thinks. He's like, oh, is this where the wooden horse is? Yes. So he goes and searches for it. And as we know, he finds it there.
Yes.
And then he has a little bit of a freak out.
Yeah.
Because he's like, that memory was real.
Yes. No, I mean, I had the same reaction. Obviously, I wasn't Ryan Gosling, but when he followed the owner to the office, I recognized those hallways. Like, okay, I've seen this before. And then when he walked down and he started walking across those stairs and down to the furnace, I was like, oh crap. The memory that he mentioned is real. That means there's a chance that he's a boy in the story. Yeah.
That's what it leads to. It kind of leads you to believe maybe he's the child.
Yeah.
And then obviously when he finds the horse and he looks at it and it's got the numbers, you're like, oh shit! Like, is he
freaked out?
Is he the kid? Is he the kid? And he believes that he's like a bit freaked out as well.
Yeah.
And like I think he goes back to his place first. I can't remember if he goes back to his place or to the police station.
I don't think he went back to the police station.
Because he does go back, and then she's like, did you find him? And he's like, did you find the kid? And he's like, I did.
Ah, yes. I think
I think he goes, he must go home first, and like talk to it with Joy, and Joy's like, wow, you are real.
Yes.
You are a real person. You know, I realized you were special. And then he goes to the memory person, the person that makes memories for the replicants.
Yes.
So he goes to there's this woman who lives in a spear. She's like, oh, I'm very sick. I can't get out of this spear.
Yeah.
So I make memories for replicants to make them feel more authentic, more human.
Yes.
And so she's in the process of making a memory. And he's like, oh, why do you make them so good? It's like, well, I've been isolated my whole life, so I have to imagine what it's like.
Yeah.
That's why I make them so good.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, I've got this memory you need to look at. I want to know if it's real or not.
Yes.
So she watches his memory, and she cries a bit and is a bit emotionally taken back. And she's like, yes, this is real. And for the first time, Kay kind of breaks.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think Joy starts calling him, you're a good Joe.
Yes.
Starts calling him Joe at this point. And he like freaks out. He's just like, oh my God, what the fuck? And he like throws the chair flying across and he's like screams at the top of his lungs. And even I think this is when the audience is like, oh shit.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got to be the child.
Yeah, he's got to be the child.
And then I think that's when he goes to the police station.
Which I think is a bad decision.
Yeah.
I think after he lashed out the emotion, I think he got a voice message. Didn't he?
It must have been from the chief to come in.
Like, so come back in.
Because then he does the test again.
Yes.
And then he's really out.
Yeah.
And then he goes into the chief's office, and the chief's like, yeah, you did not pass that test.
Yes.
We can't let you go.
Yes.
And then she asks him, like, what the hell happened? And she's like, I found him.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, where was he? He's just working an ordinary job.
Yes.
And, it wasn't anything special. And she's like, was it done? And he's like, yeah, it's done.
So he lied to the chief as well,
He lied to her to say that it's been taken care of. Because in his mind, he thinks he's the child.
Correct.
And she's like, I can help you get out of here, but you've got to get right. You've got to like realign yourself to like not be out of whack.
Okay.
But that's kind of when it sets off to like the second arc of the story of like him trying to deal with the fact that he might be the child.
Now, this is one of the details that I'm not very happy with about this movie. Let me know what you think. So, when he came back to the police station and he failed the test, I didn't really feel the weight of the consequence. You know what I mean? So when the chief of police said, "Okay, so you didn't pass the test. You got 48 hours to figure this out." It was so casual. Like, I didn't understand the consequence of a failed test.
I think it's meant to be they're going to like arrest them and take them in to make sure they're like at the level.
Yeah.
But she's saying I can get, because she's assuming it's because he's killed this kid or this person.
Yeah.
And that it's affected him so much that she's like, hey, I'm going to give you some time, get yourself right, and then come back in and we can say like, oh, it was just like a blip.
Yeah.
And it didn't really affect. I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah.
But obviously he's on like a whole different path now. He's not.
Yeah, he wasn't even thinking about that.
He doesn't care about that anymore because when he goes back, he's like, how can I find like my father? Like, how can I find out more about this?
Yeah.
Because then at this point he takes, is that before he brings, so I think before this, when Joy finds out he's like a real boy, she gets the prostitute from before, the replicant, to come in.
This is after the conversation with the chief of police, because I remember the chief of the police told him, hey, okay, you got 48 hours to get this right. Leave your badge, leave your gun, and then he just went home. And then he went home, and then the prostitute followed him. Yeah,
because I remember he was walking home and she was following him. Yeah. Where I think Joy hired him to come and be a substitute for her. Yeah. So Joy has gotten this prostitute from before because she said to him, it's like, oh, I noticed you liked her. So they do this weird kind of like
syncing.
Yeah, they sync up so they can like pretend to sleep together. And that's that was like a whole weird scene as well. But I thought it was like well done.
The visuals of that scene is phenomenal. Yeah. Like you can tell that you understand what's going on. Joy was trying to sync with this prostitute, but it's impossible. So you can tell all
it's
the
like
difference.
A little out of sync, but like trying to be close enough.
Yes.
And so they kind of have this moment together, And the next morning they kind of wake up and the girl sees the toy and like has a little look at it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it seems like she noticed it
Yeah.
and knows what that is. But before she leaves, she has like a bug. And
Yeah.
she bugs Kay or
Yeah.
Joe at this point. She puts a bug in. And then Joy shows up and it's like, get out. We're done with you, essentially. Get out of here.
Okay, so that is another thing that I wasn't happy with. So Joyce is like the artificial intelligence that takes care of the house. She noticed that this girl was touching the wooden horse, but she didn't notice that she was putting the bug inside the jacket.
I don't know if she was watching that much.
Yeah.
Like, I see what you're thinking. She's like surveillance.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's surveillance.
Okay.
I don't think she's like sees everything that's going on. Well, I guess I think we're trying to figure out how it works in a movie. So it's like, I didn't see her as surveillance. I thought she's more like close to Kay and kind of knows what Kay's knows, essentially. Not so much as like, I see exactly everything that's going on where I am and stuff. Because that's what I always thought. I'm like, oh, how didn't she notice she put... But I assume it's because she didn't really pay attention to that, didn't care what she was doing, or she was like, well, we're finished.
Maybe she wasn't on.
Well, maybe that as well. Maybe she wasn't turned on either.
Yeah.
It's another thing. But yeah, that was a whole interesting sequence because even her, the prostitute that they got, when she was looking at it, it's like, oh, why does she recognize it as well? So that kind of like, that's like a whole other level to it. It's like, why would she know what it is? But so anyway, at this point, they're like, I think him and Kay and Joy are trying to figure out what they do next. So they take the wooden horse. They go to a guy that can kind of like scan it to try find where it is. That scene's great as well. That guy's pretty funny when he's like, hey, what do you want for this? I can give you like a goat. I can give you a real horse. I thought that was hilarious. And he's like, no. I just want to know where this comes from.
Yes. It's real wood, my friend.
It's real wood.
You're rich.
You're rich. I can goat, a horse. What do you want?
And I think he was calling himself a doctor as well. Whatever you want, Dr. Gamzee can get for you. And then they found out where the horse is from.
Because it was highly radiated, I think they were referring to. So it's like, there's only one place that highly radiated.
Yeah. Okay.
Vegas.
That's it. Vegas. And I think before they took the journey to Vegas, Joy told Kay to transfer all of her memories onto the animator. And he was like, oh, but I can't do that. If anything happens to this machine, you're gone. And I said, yeah, just like a real girl.
Yeah, so that's like another layer that she wants to feel real for him. And she's already done so many things kind of before this to like make that kind of transition to being like trying to be as real as she can for him.
One of the things I read online about this detail, so like throughout the movie we got reintroduced to Joy as a product of the Wallace company
later on in the movie.
Yeah. And like when we see her in the commercials kept saying whatever you want to hear, whatever you want to see. There's an opinion online that says she's only saying this. She's only saying the things like, okay, I want to be a real girl for you. I want to do this for you just because she's programmed that way. It's not like she wants to do it for him just because she's programmed to say whatever her owner wants to hear. So obviously in this case, she got the data that Joe consider her to be a real girl. So that's an interesting opinion. What do you think about that?
Like, it's hard to see if she had the motivation because we'll get to it a bit later, but she does try to protect him. She doesn't when there's a point when Wallace come to get him later and she tries to protect him, it isn't like she doesn't just like ignore him.
Yeah.
And whether or not she's programmed to like try to make sure that he's going to be attached to her for the rest of the journey, it's only his perception of her that kind of matters for the story because it's like he perceives her as someone important and real to him. Yeah. And I think that means more that this is like one of the most important connections to him through most of the movie. Yeah. Because it's just like, oh, this is someone real that we connect and, we actually do things for each other. As much as Joy can do anything for him, she does. And I think that means something. He's like, oh, no one really does anything for me much.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess his expectation for intimate interaction is pretty low.
It's exactly zero. So that's what I mean. That's like anything is like, it means a lot.
Yeah. So they went to Vegas. That's
Even that scene when they're like kind of flying in.
Yeah.
And it's all the dust.
Yes.
And they find bees and like, what are the bees doing here?
Why did he stick his hand inside a beehive?
Just to see what's going on. Because they don't attack him. They kind of like swarm onto his hand.
Yeah.
Which is always like interesting. It's like they don't attack him. Don't see him as an enemy. So I'm like, oh.
Okay.
But bees can be docile if you're like pretty calm with them.
Okay.
Obviously, if you're angry with them, they're going to try to kill you. But
the movie didn't explain the bees at all.
I think it was just like a little thing. I don't think it meant too much.
Yeah,
I just thought it was a funny thing. I just thought it meant more that like, because what we knew of it is like, oh, this is highly irradiated, which is usually not good. I don't know how it affects the replicants, but I assume maybe it doesn't or maybe it does, but it maybe just means like, oh, this place is a bit safer now. Like there's actually biological life here living, so we're probably safe. Okay. That's what I read it as. I'm sure it could mean anything. Who knows? You can interpret things how you want, but that's how I saw it. I'm like, oh, there are things living here. Okay. So maybe whoever made this wooden horse could be here as well.
Okay. Yeah, of course. And he went inside the casino. He was walking around.
And did he notice some of the booby traps? I think he noticed some of them first.
Yes.
So he knew someone was there.
Okay. So he knew someone was there. And then he saw the dog.
I think he played did he play the piano first and then saw the dog?
Yeah.
I do remember him and he just like looks off and there's just a dog there. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And the dog was standing in the dark.
Yeah, he was just like, what's this? Who's this person?
I was like, okay, Resident Evil too much. I was just waiting for the dog to just like to open his mouth and it's like
has 5 mouths and it comes and attacks you.
And this is when we got introduced to Deckard. Deckard.
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, yes. But I think the first conversation they had with each other was a quote from a book, The Treasure Island. Have you got a bit of a cheese of you, boy, or something? So that was the first line that Deckard said to Kay. And then Kay was like, Treasure Island? And then, yes.
Yeah.
He reads, so do I. Not much to do around here.
yeah, exactly.
I don't think they have resolved the mystery from the first movie. Is Deckard a replicant?
It's very. They say they like have the director's cut, and it's meant to be a bit more direct with the answer. But I do prefer it being up in the air. That it's like it could be either way.
Yeah,
because that's. As we see a bit further in the movie, Wallace like interrogates him and says like, you were made for this or whatever. And it's just like, oh.
How did they find out where Kay went?
So
before he went to Vegas, Joy told him to break off the antenna just so that they can't follow him.
But I think they were still tracking him.
From the bug, you think?
I think it was from Joy, the bug, because the bug are a different group.
Right.
I think it was still through Joy that they were still tracking him.
Yeah.
And you could see that she was watching through the thing anyway, so I'm sure they knew where he was going anyway.
Yeah. I'm surprised it took them that long to send in like the armies.
It wasn't too long. It doesn't, because it may seem long, because I think that whole set piece where him and Decker were fighting was pretty cool.
That was pretty funny.
When they're in the like auditorium or like the theater, and Elvis is like playing, and they're like slowly fighting, and he's like, "I don't want to fight," and he's like,
Harrison Ford is so funny in this scene. Like he kept punching Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, and he would just stand there.
And he's like, "I don't want to hurt you," and then Decker kept punching him, and Ryan just took them. And then, okay, are you done now? And then Harrison Ford was like, okay, we can keep going at it. He's obviously out of breath. We can keep going at it, or we can have a drink.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was great.
During one of the interviews on Graham Norton, Harrison Ford punched Ryan Gosling for real once in this scene. And Ryan was like, why did you punch me in the face?
That sounds like Harrison Ford.
Elvis appeared in this scene a few times. And then they just went to get a drink. I like the fact that he poured a drink
for the dog.
On a dog as well.
And then Joe at this point asks him, because even Harrison or Decker asks him, he's like, you got a name? And he's like, he recites his numbers. He's like K15, whatever. And he's like, no, what's your name? And he like thinks about it and he's like, Joe's my name.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're pouring a drink and then he pours some for the dog and then Joe's like, oh, is that real or not? He's like, I don't know.
Ask him.
Ask him, yeah. Which is like another layer of like, does it matter?
Yeah.
But that was kind of cool.
That conversation was really short. Even though they spent a bit of time on screen together, but that conversation is quite ambiguous.
Because Kay's asking him kind of about the child and Rachel and stuff, like trying to like, but he never comes out and says like, oh, hey, I think I'm your kid. Yeah. Which I think is good because I think that might have been a bit weird for the movies. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's good that he keeps it to himself to be like, oh, what's actually going on? Because like you said, it isn't a long conversation. Yeah. And then they have like a bit of a break. Yeah. And then he kind of looking around his apartment and you can see he's carved out a whole lot of other animals. Yes. And he puts the horse back there. Yeah. Which I thought was like a nice little touch. He's like, guys, brought it home. Then
during this scene, there were a few cars from the enemy.
Yeah, they've kind of pinpointed them. Yeah. And then Decker's alarm have gone off to be like, yeah, you didn't get followed, did you? And he's like, no. And
I came by myself.
Yeah, I came by myself.
But before that, he was just chilling on the balcony.
Yeah.
You noticed that. Like, he was just literally just chilling on the balcony, looking at nothingness. And then he realized, oh, crap, there are a bunch of cars here. And so during this scene, right? So you mentioned that during the conversation, he didn't outright say, "Hey, I think that I'm your son." But in my mind, I still had that kind of idea. Okay, so he's talking. He might be the boy. He might be the boy. He's talking to the dad. When they realize that they are being followed, Deckard ran downstairs to run to the car. Yeah, to
try to get out.
Ryan, so Kay bursts through the wall.
That was crazy. I was like even because you never really see anything like that through the rest of the movie, really. Mm-hmm. It always takes you by surprise.
Okay.
Who needs a door?
But that's one of the evidence that I was talking about. So, so if he is not a replicant, that means that he doesn't have the enhanced strength.
But that's the thing as well. Like, how does that even play? That's like a thing. Like, how does that even play into like a replicant being born naturally? Like, that's the thing. We don't know how that. At this point, we don't know who the child is. So we're just like, oh, are they literally just still replicants? Yeah. Because even before that, even before we knew he was the child, he still displayed like replicant feats that they could do. But yeah, that was like the biggest one, like him getting, fighting and stuff, like whatever. But him like literally running through a wall even like Deckard like just went through a door. Yeah. Like it saved like a little bit of time, but he could have went through the door. But obviously they were too late.
Yes, and he saved Deckard from the missile. Yeah. Just before the car exploded. And then a bunch of guys wearing gas masks walking out. I assume they are human because they can't really withstand the radiation like the replicants. So they was wearing gas masks.
Maybe they didn't know how bad it was. Yeah. But you never know. Okay. That makes sense though, right? Like they've got the radiation.
Okay, they must be human. And Deckard put up a good fight, but obviously he's too old.
Because was he fighting Love or the other people?
So Deckard was fighting the two goons in a mask. And then Ryan Gosling killed one. So Kay killed one of them, and then Love just appeared out of nowhere and kick his ass.
Beats him down.
Yes, and they just left him there. Like they didn't watch the Zombieland movie. That you need to hit like
the double tap,
the double tap shot on the head
can't
first.
Just shoot him once.
No, you can't shoot the main character.
But even that's a weird thing because like at this point in time, Kay thinks he's the child, and that they only take the father, Decker. They leave him, like you say. Like, that's a bit odd. You would think maybe at this point they might have figured out what he thinks. Yeah. And before they left, they destroyed the animator. Yeah. So kill Joy. That's the other thing I was getting onto. So Joy comes out to like, I think Love was like tried beating his ass or whatever, and then she's like, "No, stop!" And then she like just steps on it and destroys it. So that's technically Joy's dead.
Yeah. But before that, I think Kay was trying to get to the animator, and that's what drew Love's attention to the animator.
Yeah, she obviously destroyed it on purpose to get at him as well.
Yeah.
But was it in? Or maybe it's a bit later. I can't remember because she tries to copy Wallace when he does the whole kissing scene. When he kisses
yeah.
I can't remember if that was then or a bit later on when they fight.
A bit later on.
I think it's in the last fight, right?
Yes. So they just left him there to die, and then we had the interrogation scene between Deckard and Wallace.
And that was crazy as well.
What do you think about Wallace's office? It's full of water.
It's pretty cool. It's a bit over the top, but I'm sure he has plenty of money considering he's on like 6 or 7 planets or whatever the number is. But I love that whole scene between him and Deckard. Like, that was crazy when he's like talking to him about it and stuff. And then when he eventually is like, "Hey, if you help us, we can bring Rachel back."
Yeah.
And that was like when she like walks out and stuff. They did a pretty good job. I don't know what they would have. I think it was like a double, and then they just like
they animated the face. Yeah.
And then like when you can see it in his face that he's just like really trying.
It's like, oh crap, she's here.
Yeah. And then obviously after, it must have been like 30 seconds, and then Deckard's
lucky.
like, Deckard's like, well, the eyes are green.
Yeah, her eyes are green.
And then not Love just like shoots her dead, and I'm like, fucking hell, that was brutal as hell. Because at this point, I don't know how you felt, but I was like, felt like replicants are pretty much humans at this point.
Why do you think so?
Because I feel like even before like what we get into like the end part of the movie, I feel like most of the replicants we've run into at this point have displayed a lot of humanity, and I would say even more humanity than some of the humans.
Yeah.
Like even like Kay through the whole movie shows a lot of care for people.
Yeah.
And even other characters like acknowledge that. It's like, you're pretty, you treat us pretty well. Like you're not, as rough as like you could be.
Okay.
And even like early on with the miracle, like the replicants are trying to protect this child and do anything at any cost to like protect it. That's very human.
Yeah.
Like why, if they're just, robots, why would they bother to go this far to protect something?
Yeah.
That shouldn't really bother them. But because that's what I love about this movie, where it kind of shows that the characters that aren't human are the most human. And obviously we'll move a bit further on because there's obviously other scenes that like get into that. But so they have the interrogation. Yeah. And then now we go back to Kay or Joe. Yeah. And then he's with this other group.
Yeah. The Revolution. The Revolution Army. And I think they rescued him. They tended his injury. Because
as we said before, they bugged him. Yes. So they knew where he was. Yeah. So obviously they went to get him and realized what was going on, and they try to help him. Yeah. And they're talking. So the woman in charge was the woman in the photo that had the child from the beginning, because she shows him a photo again, and he was like, "Oh, that's the photo I saw." And then they're like going through what we're doing and kind of stuff we understood, like, "Oh, there's a child. We know they can recreate. We're going to try fight for this." Yeah. And then she says, "We need to find the girl." Yes. And then
she's fine. She's doing fine. She's safe.
And then Joe's like, "Girl?
She? Her?
Sure, yeah." And then she was like, "Oh, you thought it was you." Yeah. And then she says, "I think we all did." Yeah. And then that kind of refers back to when the prostitute picks up the toy, because she had the memory as well. So a lot of these replicants have had that memory of being in that orphanage, finding that horse or hiding that horse. So her seeing it, she's like, she remembered it. Wow. So he just had... It's sad, but he coincidentally was the one that found it. Yeah. So if any other replicant who had the same memory found that, they probably would have felt the same way. Yeah, wow. They would have been like, my memory's real, which it was, but sadly, they all shared it.
I didn't realize that they shared that memory, but that's a very interesting point. And I think at that point, the leader of the army trying to recruit Kay.
Yeah, she was trying to say, "Hey, join us she's like, go save Deckard, essentially.
No, I think she said go kill Deckard.
Oh, that's right.
She said she
does
go
kill Deckard.
That's like, okay, so you cannot let Deckard lead them back to me. You let them to Deckard.
Yeah.
So now you have to go and kill Deckard.
Because that's like you were saying. How did they track him? When they destroyed Joy, they don't know where he is anymore.
Correct.
So that's why I think they were tracking through Joy, even though she does say like break the antenna.
Yeah. Okay.
So they figured it out.
Okay. I see what you mean.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense now, doesn't it? And now they are taking Deckard back to Off-World. What is Off-World?
So we're on World, so they're going Off-World. So I assume they're on Earth at the moment. And like early in the movie when we're first introduced to Wallace, he says like we've got 8 to 9 other planets that they've captured because of replicants, or at least, I guess engineered so they can live on. So I'm assuming, how you got rules and regulations on one planet, so he's going to take him somewhere else where he can do whatever he wants to him. Mm-hmm. That's what I interpret it as.
Okay. So Off-World is pretty much like another planet or one of the places that doesn't follow any of the regulations.
Yeah, so Wallace can do whatever he wants to try to get his answers. Okay. That's what I see it as.
I'm still surprised that they're still using flying cars with all that advanced technology. Like when you can clone human, and then you still have flying cars. Like what if you have like intergalactic transmitter?
Well, I think that's like a completely different technology, but like they're not really cloning humans. But they're making them.
They're making them.
I don't know if they clone anybody in this, but they do try to remake Rachel. Yeah. But it shows that she is a replicant. Yeah. But it is. I do see what you mean. Like you think that'd be a bit further along with the technology, but having bloody slaves built for you is like that's pretty big on the technological scale. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Like, if they had a teleport, it would cut out all of this story, wouldn't it, Darren?
There would be no final fight.
Kay wouldn't be able to come back to save him, wouldn't he? But
the set piece just before that final fight, Kay was
just like walking along the city.
Yep, and then he saw Joy again.
This is like I think this is like my second favorite scene in the movie.
Okay, why is that?
Because it's like a realization for him. Mm-hmm. Because Joy to him's been the most important like character towards him, and then this advertisement just looks at him and like they're like he's trying to sell her, and then she literally says you're a good Joe, and it kind of like clicks for him to be like, oh shit, maybe she was just putting it on for me. Maybe the most important thing in my life was like manufactured for me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really a real thing in the end of the day. Wow. And I think that really sets him on the thing of like how the movie kind of goes on, that he's like, oh no, I think I'm going to save Deckard. I think that's what changes his mind.
Okay.
Whether or not he was thinking about killing him or not. Yeah. But I think that's when it goes to like, I want to save him. He's got something to live for. He has something meaningful. Yeah. I'm going to try help him.
Yeah. And do you think that he was trying to help the revolution as well? Like the resistance?
I don't know. Obviously, at this point, it's like right at the end of the movie. So you don't know if he really is that motivated to help them. But I do think he wants to help Deckard. Like, I think he gets that, like...
That's the purpose for the moment.
He knows how it feels. Like, he had maybe, like, one point of the movie where he really felt like he was important. And he doesn't want people to lose that. He realized that's how this other person who we don't know who it is, they deserve that chance, and Deckard deserves to like find his child and like have that moment to feel special together, where he's only had it, for how long we're saying the period, like a couple of days in this movie. So to feel like you're not just like everybody else, feel something special.
Okay, I see what you mean. So during that time, it's more like he found a purpose of his life, right? Before that, his purpose was killing his own kind.
Yeah, just a job.
Just a job.
What he's programmed to do.
Mm-hmm. And now he's like, okay, this is now my decision. I have a choice, I have a purpose, and my purpose is now to save someone instead of killing someone. And then, it took us to the final fight. There was an airstrike. He was driving his flying cars, and he was shooting the other cars out of the sky.
Didn't realize they had guns until that point, but good day they did.
Yeah, I mean, those guns would have been very helpful during that graveyard, that junkyard scene.
True, but I don't know if he gets disabled or not, but could have tried.
Yeah. What do you think about the final scene? Not the final scene, but that fight. So Deckard was handcuffed into the chair, and where were they? Like, were they at the bottom of a dam or something?
Yeah. So wherever Kay shot them down, it was like in a water. It looked like the ocean. It didn't look like a small body of water. It looked like a big body of water, and they were like their kind of car that Deckard and Love were in was like slowly gaining, like it was slowly descending in the water.
Yeah.
And that's like, like you were saying, that Deckard's like chained in and he can't quite get out. And it's like, is he going to drown? But while that's happening, Kay and Love are fighting.
Yeah.
Going at it.
Yes. Now that I think of it, is that another evidence that Deckard might be human?
Well, maybe. They kind of try to point out that he's like a replicant, but I like to believe that he is like
just a human.
Just
being.
a human.
Okay. Love kicked Kay's ass during the fight again.
And like I was saying before, she does the Wallace thing. She like kisses him and then like plants the like finishing. Well, she believes it's a finishing move, which is like, I think he gets stabbed in the chest.
Yep.
And she thinks she's done, and she like goes to swim to try to get Deckard out of the water.
Yeah, and before she swam back, she said something like, "I'm the best one" or something.
Yeah. I am the one or something. Yeah.
I'm the one. She swam back, and was she planning to rescue Deckard?
Yeah.
Or was
she was about to like save Deckard, but that's when Kay comes back in and like roots her, chokeholds her back into the car,
and then he drowned her as well.
Yeah, so they like wrestle for a little bit. She tries to get back, and then he like jams her into the water, puts her out, and then he goes and saves Deckard, because I think he like gets uncuffs and stands up, and then the water like gets over him.
Yeah,
and then that's what I found. So Kay's just like just breaks it open, and I was like, oh, okay,
that's very easy.
Yeah,
and you see, so that's what I mean. Like the replicants can break it quite easily. So if Deckard had been a replicant, I'm pretty sure he does have
figure out how to get out of it or something. Whether he knows or not may be a thing as well. Like he mightn't be able to realize, but I would like to think he's human. But but then this kind of leads us into like the end of the movie.
Yes,
which is my favorite scene's like the second last scene when they're in the snow and Kay takes him to see his daughter.
Yes.
When he's like, go in there and meet your daughter. And Deckard's like, why have you done this? Why have you done any of this? He like doesn't understand why.
Who am I to you? I think that's a very beautiful question.
And he doesn't really answer him. He just like, go on. Like meet your daughter. And as he goes in, you can see that Kay kind of just is like thinking this. You notice that you notice that he's bleeding out and he's like probably not going to make it. But in this moment, this is why I think this really like capped off the movie for me. He realizes, he kind of like realizes what he's done, and he's kind of like happy, not happy, but he's kind of like he's done something for himself now. He's achieved something for himself that wasn't told by anyone else. No one programmed for him to do it. He made a decision to save Deckard and bring her to his daughter.
Yeah.
No one told him to do that, and he did it on his own will. And as he's like sitting there on those steps, kind of like as he's slowly dying, he's like accepts that.
Yeah.
And it's just such a sad moment as he's just kind of lying there. Because that's where I wish the movie ended, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like him just lying on the stairs.
There. And it really highlights the fact that he was very alone.
Yeah.
Like he had his AI girlfriend before, and then he lost that. He had the idea that he was the boy before, and he lost that, and he thought that he had a father, and he lost that as well. So he was literally by himself on those steps. But you mentioned that he was happy because at least that he had a purpose.
Yeah, his final thing he did was kind of his own choosing.
Okay, interesting. So does that mean that? I mean, this is like a big question from the Blade Runner movies. Like, what does it mean to be a human?
That's why I love this movie. It really kind of goes into being like, what makes someone a human?
Like, what do you think? What makes us a human? What makes
Well,
us
like
human?
we haven't got to a point where it's like we're on the like brink of like figuring out like what like an intelligence is, but like what would defer someone to be human? Like if we recreate, like we create beings that are pretty much human and then give them memories as well to think they're human. Like why doesn't that make them human? Just because we created them, just because they weren't birthed into the world. Because like early in the movie when he says, "Oh, what's it like to have a soul?" Because that's his feeling what the difference is. He's like, "Oh, to be born into the world gives you something."
Right.
But does that give you something? Is there something different between being born and being made? Like, I don't think there's that much of a difference.
Yeah.
And that's like the thing. That's why early on when the detective's like, let's get rid of this child, because it breaks the illusion. There's that illusion that these replicants aren't really people, and it's a barrier, but they could be fine without the humans. They could live by themselves. They could have their own families. They could grow up to get old. They could have kids and live life like a human. But the humans are the ones stopping them from being human, which feels brutal, but also very human, and being scared of what could have been made and giving them a chance to feel something. Where I feel like Kay, in his final moments in this movie, had that. Had something to choose for himself, had that motivation, had that ability to be like, I'm not following anyone else's path, anyone else's choices. I'm doing this because I feel like this is what I want, and I feel like this is how I want things to go.
Right. So what you're talking about is like a form of free will, like,
exactly.
like freedom. Because at the end of the day, Kay is still a replicant, and he was created for a purpose. But in his final moments, he made a choice by himself. So free will, like the choices that we make in life is that what makes us human?
I don't think necessarily, but I think it's the ability to do it.
Right.
Because like all the replicants don't have that choice. That's kind of like the thing. Like they have to do what they're made for. Because early on in the movie, there's someone trying to buy replicants from Love, and she's like, "Oh, I know you want some mining ones, but we can make some like luxury versions for you if you want to like sleep with them or whatever." So they're just things to people, to humans. They're not really, they don't see them as people. That's why, like early on in the movie, you see Kay gets such a harsh reception, and they call him skin jobs. And even the front door of his apartment has
Skinner.
Yeah, Skinner. Yeah. Like they don't see them as people, and you can see that's how Kay perceives it as well, because he doesn't, like we said, he doesn't reach out to any humans. He doesn't. The only person, the chief, is the only one that we'd say has a kind of relationship with him, but he still is like doesn't want to make that leap to whatever that relationship would have been. He doesn't want that. He feels like, oh, humans don't care about us. They just use us.
Wow. Okay. So the movie final scene is when Decker met his daughter. Turns out to be one of the characters that we have seen before.
Yeah.
I mean, in case you're one of the people who haven't seen the movie, I
was like, it's a bit late now. Spoiler alert.
We spoiled out the whole movie for you. But it seems like the movie ended there with like, I don't know what's it called, like the intention to continue that story, because we don't know what's going to happen now. We don't know what's going to happen to his daughter. So do you think that they will make another one, like Blade Runner 3000 or something?
3000. But I don't think they would follow from this story now, because I don't know if it would capture, I don't know what they would go into or how they would go about it, because it's just like she's there standing, she's got like the ring open, there's like snow coming in, and I don't even know if Decker says much. He like kind of walks in, she's like, "Oh, I'll be there in a minute," and like walks over to him, and he like puts his hand onto the glass.
Yes.
So it's more that just kind of the message of like, oh, they're finally together.
Yeah.
Even though through the movie, or when we get Deckard in, he's just like, oh, I'm deliberately not going near her for her own. Well, he doesn't even know if it's a girl or a boy at this point. He's just saying, I'm staying away from them to save them, to make sure, nothing bad's going to happen, because the whole movie you can see what's bloody happening.
Yeah.
But like, I don't mind the scene, but I did feel like it was more of Kay's story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through
it could have
this
ended
film.
with Kay's others,
because
right?
You can assume they got together. Like, he went through the door, unless someone was there and like popped Kay and Deckard in the head or whatever. Yeah. But like, I feel like it doesn't take away from me, but I feel like him like dying on those steps is just like so symbolic and such a good kind of just a good way to end the movie there. Because he did complete his job, and like we do see that they meet up, but like he wouldn't know, like him dying, he wouldn't know if they met or not, but he feels like he did it. And I feel like that can mean more rather than, and us not knowing as well could be like, oh, did they get safely together? Did they meet up? Did they, like you said, we see them and it's like, oh, is this like the next movie? It's like, is it going to be about an old man trying to help his daughter get away? But where I think it's better to speculate on that more than, because like, how old is Harrison Ford now? 100 and something? Like,
I don't think he's going to be in the next
Yeah, that's
one.
what I mean. I feel like it is a good, even though from the first Blade Runner to this one, it's like a long period of time as well, but hopefully it's a long period for the next one before they don't think about touching it again. Because I do feel like this is, I always hate when they try to leech too much out of something that was successful, but even though, talking about successful movies, this didn't do well in the box office. Because this, I don't know what its budget was. It was like 300 million. Wow. I think it only kind of like
just
broke even or something, which I felt sad about. But also watching the movie, you can understand why maybe a wide audience would be like, I don't really get it too much. But, which I was a bit sad. I was like, oh.
So let's say if someone who hasn't watched this movie and they want you to kind of tell them the core message of this movie, what would you tell them?
It's hard without knowing the person, because I think you want someone that's going in willing to watch it. Because some people, nothing against, some people just want to watch a movie and not want to think too much. Where I think, like, I don't think it's so deep. Like, it's not like you have to underlying. I think it's all there for you, whether you want to read into it or not. But I do think there is that, like you said, overlying message of like, what is human? Like, if I had to say that was the base message, I'm like, it maybe challenge your concept of what a human should be. Like maybe what I would say. But even then people would be like, why do I want to watch that movie? But I feel like it's such, like it does it in, I'm sure at some point we'll get to the first movie, but I feel like this does a very good job of that, like challenging the, challenging what you believe, what a human is. If there was ever beings that were close to being human, like.
And I think that's a question that we can leave to the audience. Leave comments below. What do you think a human is? I mean,
I think it's a squirrel.
It's a squirrel. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review, and see you in the next episode.